Good. Okay, let's get going and see how we go this morning. By the way, if you've been keeping a journal or a diary during this time, I wrote in my journal about Boris has put us on lockdown, and I think it was March 20 something. And so I began to write day 1, day 2, day 3, and so today is day 40. So just for your information, we're on day 40, trusting there's going to be some kind of shift this week. So maybe next Saturday we'll be talking about a couple of other things, but for now we're on day 40. 40 in the Bible signified a period of trial and testing. We know Jesus was tempted 40 days, 40 nights. Noah was in the ark 40 days, 40 nights. Lent is 40 days. So 40 is quite significant for us as believers. And so today is day 40, whatever that might mean for you. Saturday, 2nd of May, 2020. And I feel like God has been talking to me a lot this week about stories, our stories. And then I began to think about bubbles, hence the little demonstration yesterday of bubbles. Who doesn't love to play with bubbles? And what kind of kid were you when you were younger and they used to get the bubbles out? Were you the kid that used to just go and run through them all and smash everybody's? Were you protective of your bubble and you tried to catch the bubble, only for it not to last that long, but you were excited? And I think at the end of my video yesterday, I managed to catch 2 just for a few seconds. Did you catch them or did you smash them? What kind of kid were you when you were playing with balloons? And for some of us, you know by now that I believe that we have a strong say in our tomorrow. We have a strong say in our future and what that can look like for us, regardless of what's gone on in our past. And so I want to encourage us all today that it's time to let go and to pop some of our bubbles. That's what I believe, and our stories. You're still talking about stories that happened a long time ago. You're still protecting your bubbles, and it's time to get them popped. That's what I feel God's been sharing with me this week. And I came up with 2 kinds of bubbles. There could be more. And if I get more revelation, we'll talk about bubbles again next week. But for today, he's been talking to me about 2 types of bubbles. Let me give you some scriptures, just kind of as a foundation as to where we're going to go today. First one is in Philippians 3:13. These scriptures we know very well, but they're always worth reminding ourselves of. Philippians 3:13. Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but one thing I do. You can all complete that line because I know you all know it. Forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of Christ Jesus. So it's me. I've got to forget. And if you think about Paul writing this, the kind of things he needed to forget were pretty huge. He murdered Christians. He was the one who was ravaging the land to get rid of Christians in the true church. He had a lot to forget. But he's telling us here, one thing I do, I forget what's behind and I go forward to what lies ahead. That's on me. I press on and you press on to what's ahead, forgetting what's behind. But that can be difficult, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go. Then a scripture in 2 Corinthians 10 that says, 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. How hard is that, to take thoughts captive? It's hard to take thoughts captive, but we're told to do that here again by Paul, writing to the Corinthians. The King James version of that verse, which I love, says, cast down imaginations. Oh, wow, girls, our imaginations sometimes can just run ragged, can't they? You can absolutely convince yourself that something is true that is completely not true. We do it, and before we know it, we can be down a rabbit warren of stuff and you get to the end of the rabbit warren and you find out none of it was true. More on that in a little while. So I've got a little drawing for us today. I hope you like my artwork. It took me ages. No, it didn't. There's my little person in the middle, and there's some bubbles that we're talking about this morning, and there's some very real kind of bubbles here. Things like divorce and abuse and accidents and adoption and drugs. Massive one here, betrayal by friends. Have you ever been betrayed by a friend? When you get betrayed by someone that you don't know very well, you can shrug it off, can't you, and say, oh well. But when you're betrayed by a friend, it is really hard to bear. It's tough, isn't it? Betrayal by friends, abuse, these things are real events, and they can happen in some or all of our lives. You may have 1 or 2 things on there that have affected your life. You may have none, but you can think of ones that I haven't thought of. Then when we get these kind of events in our lives, they lead to the emotional bubbles of insecurity, of rejection, self-pity, hurt, fear. And these bubbles are all floating around in our world and in our lives, and we enjoy telling the story about our bubble and, hey, sit down. Thanks, Sarah. A star for the art. That's really kind. I never got that at school, so I really appreciate that. All these bubbles that we enjoy talking about, don't we? Admit it. You enjoy talking about it. They're painful events, and you want everyone to know what happened, and they can cause real, these emotions are real, and they can cause those emotions to float around in our world. One time, many years ago, we were at Elim Conference, and I got asked to, well, actually, they asked the ministers and their wives to go out to pray for people, and I'm not usually forward in doing things like that, but this one particular night, I felt quite urged to go and pray. So I was praying for this lady, and whenever I tell this story, I call her Lydia. She wasn't called Lydia, so if you're called Lydia, it's not about you. And she must have been in her 40s, and she told me a terrible story about how she'd been left on a hospital step when she was 2 years old. And of course I prayed and I showed compassion, but it was almost like a life lesson for me, that, because in my way of thinking and how I felt about God and what he does for you, and my thinking went down the pattern, Lydia, that was a terrible bubble that happened to you. An awful bubble. But 40 years down the track, you should have popped it by now. And that's not to say to ignore the event that happened, but it's to pop the fact that you still need ministry on that story. Stories have a time scale. Now, if something happened to you last week, and you can definitely put it in a bubble, then talk about it. You can't meet anyone for coffee, but you can via Zoom or Facebook Live or phone someone. You need to process and talk about it. You shouldn't still be talking about it 40 years down the track when you have the God of the universe living inside of you, giving life to your mortal flesh. There comes a time when our stories need to end and we need to turn a page. Now, was the story of Lydia true? 100% true. Why would she lie about something like that? Was it tragic? 100% yes. Does she need love and compassion? Yes. Was she a believer? Yes. Should she have popped the bubble by then? Yes, yes, yes. We're told to forget what is behind and strain forward for what lies ahead. And I believe with the right teaching, with coaching is crucial. That is the part that we don't like, because the coaching part might mean that someone else is going to come along with a bubble and say, hey, it's about time you pop this bubble. Stop banging on about it. coaching is so crucial. We need someone who'll put their arm around us and say, can I just talk to you about this? I think we've got a bubble that might need to be popped. And it's not easy. John is my bubble popper. And he will tell me things and say, Deb, I just need to talk to you about this. Do I like it? No. Do I sometimes have a sulk for a few minutes? Yes. But then usually, most of the time, he's right and I listen and I'm trying to pop the bubbles that are affecting my life. With the right teaching, with coaching, I believe, I'm repeating this, you can pop any bubble you want. But here's a massive word that only consists of 2 letters, if. If you want to pop your bubbles, you 100% can. But you have to want to. And that's big. That's big in this whole scenario. You have to want to pop the bubble. Now, I don't know whether you've played on a Wii. We've done it a few times in lockdown. And I think it's on Wii Fit where you do the balance games. And there's one particular one, which I would love to have shown a demonstration. Maybe I'll get around to that somehow, where you are in a bubble and you have to get down a path, not down a path, in the river. You're in the river and you're walking on the Wii Fit board and you go in and you walk in, and it's all to do with your core. If you get too close to the edge, the music goes, if you play the game, you know what I'm talking about. And you get too close to a cliff edge, you have to step backwards to get off it so that you can keep going forward. If you don't want to pop your bubble, you will avoid those cracks, those mountains, those people like the plague. Because some of us enjoy protecting our story. We want to tell our story everywhere we go. And we don't want to go near people who might pop our bubble. We don't want to listen to teaching that might pop our bubble. If we're holding unforgiveness, we do not want to talk. We don't want to go and listen to a study on forgiveness because we want to protect the bubble. A few years ago, well, it's in 1996, I think it was, and our daughter was 4. We were on a church picnic. Wouldn't you like to do that now? Can't wait to do that. Wouldn't you? We were playing games. John was doing his Ian Botham bit on the cricket pitch, and I was playing rounders with the girls. Not really pretending to be anybody because I wasn't any good at sports, but I do love to play rounders. And we were there playing, kids were playing, it was all going great, and then all of a sudden we heard these screams from the kind of sidelines, and people were screaming for John to come over, and he thought they were just having a bit of fun, and he was saying, no, I'm not coming, I'm the best innings of my life. But eventually you could tell by the tone of their voices that something was seriously wrong. And so he ran over. And even when I tell this story now, so maybe I haven't quite popped this bubble, I get emotional because our little girl was on the floor and she'd been bitten very badly by a dog. And the little dog had taken her eyebrow away. Some of you watching this will remember. And they'd taken her eyebrow away. People were on the floor, seeing if they could find it. It was just horrific. And that we went straight to a hospital in Brecon where we were there for 11 days. Went for a picnic, didn't go home for 11 days. Our life turned around in a second because Beth had just petted this dog. And so 11-year darkness kind of fell on our family. Our son was 6, so my mum and dad came down to look after him. And it was very dark. And I can remember, actually had a skin graft, and of course we got through it. But I can remember very distinctly telling that story so often. I knew what the doctor said. I knew what the people shouted at the pitch said. He said that, she said that. I felt awful. We went in the car. Our friends came after in the car. They brought us underwear and cakes, and they used to bring breath sweets. And I knew it. I had it off pat. And for anybody who wanted to listen, I wanted to tell them about my bubble. And a day came, and I can remember this very clearly, where I just felt the Lord say, Deb, it's really time to turn the page now and stop talking about this event. And I went straight to John, because you know, don't you? You know when God really speaks. And sometimes, we say God said, and we're not really sure. But when he does, when you really know it's him, you have to act on it. Yeah, Catherine, you were around then. You have to act on it. And so I went straight to John. I said, John, I just feel God's telling us we've got to stop talking about it. Because it was like everywhere we went for dinner, for coffee, on the phone, we were telling this story because it was real. And the emotions attached to it were terrible. Our little girl went through an awful thing. But I knew that the day came when I had to pop it. I had to stop talking about. And that's why I put it up there, because I put an accident. For me, that was a huge thing in my life as a mum. I can remember it was awful. But I know the day came when I had to pop it. I had to pop it and move on and forget what was behind and move forward. Let me move on to our second bubble. I don't think we're going to be done in 20 today. I hope that's okay. It's important. And what a worse bubble than what we've just been talking about are the imaginary bubbles. Remember the scripture I just read about casting down your imaginations? Imaginary bubbles are awful and they affect all of us, but they're a lie. And they create, at the top there, you can see I've written it, a victim bubble, where we're a victim, and we've got this victim bubble that can be massive and surrounds our whole life. I read a book once by Maya Angelou called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and I wrote a whole blog and message about it because it really spoke to me about this kind of thing, where if we just rewind a little bit, I said if you want to pop your bubbles you can, but too often we don't want to because of what that might mean. Oh, if I pop that victim bubble, that means I'm not going to be a victim anymore, so that means I can't really moan about that anymore. Because I've popped it, I'm forgetting what's behind and I'm pushing for what's ahead. If you don't want to do that, let me tell you what you do. You prove your story. I see it all the time, especially in church life. You will make choices out of that victim bubble of nobody cares, nobody likes me, nobody ever contacts me, and you will make your choices based on that belief system. So let me give you an example. You say no one speaks to me at church. If you want to protect that bubble, you have to make that true. So how do you do it? You rock up at church at 11:15 when it starts at 10:30, and you leave at 12. Of course, no one speaks to you. But this is how a mind of a victim works. You have to prove your story, and your actions come out of that belief system. Nobody speaks to me, nobody likes me. If that's true and I want to believe that bubble, then I have to make that be the case. And that's what you do. You make your choices from that. That's what happens. Because unless you want to pop that bubble, you have to protect your story. And you will do as little as possible to change that story. So if you think no one speaks to me, the last thing you're going to do is rock up at 9:30 when the coffee bar opens and sit and talk to somebody. You're not going to do that, because that pops your bubble. That proves that, oh, hang on a minute, people do talk to me. But if you don't want to pop that bubble, you are going to make choices that are going to prove that bubble. And that bubble then turns into self-pity. What a shocking bubble to live in. Don't live in self-pity. Get it popped today. No one's out to get you. Nobody is out to get you. But if you think they are, you will live in that bubble to the degree where that is what will happen. Because we want to protect our bubble. We want to protect our story. Don't you come near me with that pin. Don't you come near me and tell me that I need to pop this. Because if I pop the victim bubble, then I don't know who I am anymore. And nobody will know who I am anymore, because I enjoy singing in a cage. That's what Maya Angelou is talking about. She's talking about a bird who could be free, but would rather stay trapped and sing because that's the place that they know. That's the place where it's safe. If I open these doors and I fly out, people will be like, wow, where's that victim gone? And maybe I won't get a hug or a kiss or a how are you or a phone call or a, oh, we've got to make sure that she's all right. You can make sure you're all right yourself by opening that door, flying out and popping the bubble. If you're spending your life saying he said, she said, they did that, they didn't like my thing on Facebook, they didn't reply to me, you're gonna create a victim bubble, and that's where you're gonna live, and that's what's gonna be proved in your life. Your life goes in the direction of your strongest thoughts, and if your thoughts are poor me, I've been rejected, I'm hurt, I'm insecure, I'm full of fear, I've got self-pity, I'm sorry to say, but that's the way your life is going to go, because your bubbles will take you there. That's where your bubbles are going to take you. So you have to listen to people like me and others who have got a pin, who want to help you pop them. If you need help popping bubbles, talk to me afterwards, or any of your friends on here who you might know. Start a conversation. I'm finding myself, just after this week's, I knew that God was talking to me about this, because I found myself reacting to things and just suddenly thinking to myself, that's a bubble that needs to be popped in my life. And I'm thinking that way because I want to play with bubbles in my garden that are full of love, joy, peace, laughter, joy. I want to go and prance in the garden with my bubbles. But I want them to be good bubbles and not bubbles that are dragging me down. Not bubbles that make me feel, oh, I'm so sad and nobody loves me. And, well, you should have heard what they said. And I know it all. I know exactly what was happening. I've got loads more notes, but I know time's going. So let me give it one more example and then perhaps we'll continue it next week. This is just like a little example of how we can create this victim bubble. And it's only a small example, but it's true, especially in the days in which we live in. You send a text to someone and they don't reply. And you keep checking your phone. It's not replied. Sent this ages ago. 48 hours later, still haven't replied. And then it goes like this. I knew they didn't like me. Last time we were in church, she walked straight past me. I knew it. I just knew she didn't like me. I knew there was something wrong with this relationship. The way she said that to me the other day, and I put that status on Facebook and she didn't even like it. I knew it. Absolutely. And you completely convince yourself that this is true. You convince yourself it's true. And then you meet the person a few weeks down the track who is 100% oblivious to the fact that she's created a bubble in your life. And she says to you, hiya, what's up? And she says, and you say, I texted you 6 weeks ago and you never replied. I knew you didn't like me. So then there's one of two ways this can go. I didn't even get your message. It didn't come through to me. So there's your bubble pop straight away because you didn't even get your message. Or another scenario could be, my mum was in hospital 6 weeks ago and I was just dealing with so much that I didn't reply to anybody. It was just a horrible time. So I'm really sorry, but my mind was all going all over the place. You were so convinced of your bubble that was growing bigger and bigger and bigger that you had no thought of what your friend might be going through. And so after 6 weeks, you've built up this imaginary bubble, and now you have a choice. You can either, well, I don't believe you, and walk away with your bubble, or you can pop it and you can say, I'm so sorry. I was 100% wrong. I'm sorry. How's your mum? I should have been more considerate of you. It's in our hands, this. It's in our hands. So cast down imaginations. If you've got stuff going on, just check that it's not your imagination. And if you want to, if it helps you and you've got bubbles, I have, It's my magic wand. If it helps you, go in the garden and get some bubbles popped. Just say, do you know, she's right. This is absolute rubbish that I'm listening to here. None of it's true. If it's real events that happened in your life, you might need more help with that. A step-by-step process of how you get free from massive events that do affect your life. But, you know, we can all begin to pop the imaginary bubbles that are simply not true. If you keep saying things like, I'm no good, no one likes me, no one loves me, no one ever contacts me, your life's going to go that way. It is going to go that way. I'm telling you, that's how it works. Not only do I know it works medically, like scientifically, with the way our thoughts and patterns work, we've got an enemy. So don't you think that if he hears you saying, I bet she won't contact me during this pandemic, it's probable that she won't. Because he's like, right, I'll just make sure that doesn't happen. Come on. He's a master at it. He's a master of deceiving us. And it's time that we woke up from the bubbles of unreality and get them popped. The two scriptures again, for whatever bubble you think you might need to deal with right now, forget what's behind. If you're telling the same story, he said, she said, he did, she did, stop it and pop it and forget it, move forward. If it's a person, if it's I put Ethel, I hope no one's called Ethel. If it's a person, get them out of the bubble, get them popped out. It's not worth carrying it. Cast down your imaginations and forget what's behind. Father, thank you so much for this analogy of bubbles and stories. And I pray that all of us, I'm speaking to myself too, that all of us will go on a bubble popping expedition and get rid of the things in our lives that are just causing us to tell story after story and belief after belief that are just simply not true. I pray, Father, that we will all open up ourselves to bubble poppers in our lives who will tell us some hard truth at times, but we'll be willing to pop our bubbles because they're no good for us. We want to be people that play with bubbles of love, joy, peace, joy, laughter. Our family, our friends, they're the biggest bubbles that we want in our life, Lord. We don't want negative bubbles. We want positive ones. And so we commit one another to you for the rest of the day. In Jesus' name, amen. Sorry I've taken a bit longer. Kind of thought it might, because it was just like I wanted to get this word out, because I knew sometimes you know that it's something that the Lord wants you to share. So I hope it helps you. If you want asking me any questions, I'm privately contactable. Let me just say as well, if you ever message me, and I think all my friends on here will validate this, I always reply. WhatsApp, text, email, I always reply. If ever I don't, it's because it never got to me or I simply missed it. I would never not reply. So take that from me. If I'm your first lady of the house and you come to our church, take it from me, that is true. So if you've messaged me and I haven't replied, just send it me again. And let's start a conversation and let's get these bubbles popped. I love you. See you next Saturday. Have a wonderful day. I love you. Bye.